try and decode that decode that report. So today we'll attempt to share some important insights on the IPCC reports and what findings at the global scale could mean in terms of the impacts of climate change on the state of West Bengal, as well as suggest some important recommendations that the state can build concrete subnational action on. And we have with us Dr. Anjal Prakash, who's the Associate Professor and Research Director with the Bharti Institute of Public Policy at the Indian School of Business. And he's the lead author of two distinct IPCC reports released between 2019 and 2022. I'd like to now invite Dr. Anjal Prakash to share his insights through a presentation on the threats to West Bengal state identified in the IPCC report. And after his presentation, maybe we can take the conversation forward with some questions if you may have. Welcome and thank you so much, Dr. Prakash, and over to you.
Thank you so much, Brikesh. This is really my delight and my honor to be presenting the report, outcome of the report to such a distinguished panel of people here. আমি বাংলাও জানি, but my Bangla is not very good, so I'll be speaking in English. But if there's a question in Bangla, I can speak and answer as well. This is my presentation is in three parts. First part is actually that I'll tell you about the global level what has been the 10 advancement in climate science, 10 major issues which we'll find, and that has resonance in today's world. So that's one. Second, I'll decipher the sixth assessment reports finding. There are three major report which has come, which is focusing on climate science, the adaptation and the mitigation aspects. So I will be I'll decipher what it means for a country like India, what are 5 major points coming from India. And third, then I'll focus on what are the implications of these findings on West Bengal, the state of West Bengal, what has been the status, as well as what are the things that we know and the problems as well as solutions. I think that is something that I'll be focusing on. It will go on to about half an hour, most probably 5 minutes here and there. And then I'll get into a kind of a more conversation, question, answers, and all that. Okay, so let me start with the permission of the chair. Can I start, sir? Okay. So this is a 10 advancement. This is based actually 10 insights into climate science. This is based on a paper which is a global paper by Future Earth, and I've been one of the authors there. This is an yearly submission which happens just before the COP. So this paper was presented at COP, which actually helps in negotiation because it also brings in the issues much more starkly, and IPCC and aligns with IPCC's findings. So I'll just go over and give you 10 major findings which has come, which is over and above the IPCC finding, and I'll get into the IPCC report as well. So the first insight is about what we call the questioning the myths and of endless adaptation. Now, one of the things which has come up very strongly also in IPCC negotiation, that we have been talking about adaptation without talking about mitigations. I think there is a limit to adaptation, and our potential to adapt to climate change actually has strong limits. And we can see, for example, if the cyclone strikes very frequently in West Bengal, there's little what we can do to adapt, because every time the frequency and the severity increases. So we also must focus on what we call the mitigation part, and that so far mitigation was not strongly part of the discourse. This insight brings in that mitigation is also as important as adaptation. If you look at this graph, I'll very briefly explain this graph. So you have this a matrix where you have this acceptable limits this side, and have this intolerable risk. So if you go further, for example, if there's a lower risk, and then if there's a lower and then frequency is lower, then it's fine, we can still adapt. But we have what we have seen in the world is that we have already breaching the soft limit of the adaptation and going towards what we call hard limit. But at the same time, we're also seeing that if you go further in the graph, we find that there is the risks which are intolerable, and that means we cannot adapt. We may have to shift out if there's a high risk environment in which we are living in, and that's where the limit of adaptation issue comes very strongly. Because the limit of adaptation is dynamic, it's context specific, and also it interacts with other societal changes, including the human security, you have public health and economic activities. So this is something which we call cascading impact, which we have on the lives and livelihood of the people. The second part is that we, vulnerability hotspot clusters, which has been identified already, and the calculation is about 1.6 billion people live in extreme vulnerable hotspots, and this number is projected to double by 2050. And that is something that if you see the hotspot region, India and South Asia actually is one of the major hotspot regions, especially the Himalayan region. We have a huge coastline, 7,500 kilometers of coastline, and about 52% of India is also semi-arid. And that means that all the three major hotspots of the world are also concentrated in terms of ecologies of the world are concentrated in India. And that means that we are at a very, very high risk. And that is something that we must take note of, because if you look at the glaciers and mountain environment, there has been a huge impact on the glacier systems, feeding into the river basins which are fed Ganga, Brahmaputra, Indus. These are major river basins which is feeding India and South Asia, and that has been major issues. On the cyclone front, you've seen that the exposure to our cyclone systems have also been greater because of 7,500 kilometers of coastline, plus the third region, which is the semi-arid region, which is also at risk, and the heat stress is striking quite hard there. The third insight is about the new new threats on the horizon from the climate health interactions. Now, so far, I've been part of the IPCC report for last about 8 to 10 years. Initially, the interaction between climate and health has not been very sharp. Also, there has not been much research. But over the years, I think the research has also advanced. And what we have found that the impact of climate change on the health of the humans, animals, and the entire ecosystem are increasingly widespread, and the new risks are also emerging. New vector-borne diseases are being found out, and that is something areas which has never been seen. The striking of the risk, climate-related health risk, which is also becoming stronger, and that is something the third insight that I want to bring forward. And if you look at this, graph, you'll find that there has been, if you see the affected population, and if you go from the beginning, you will see that there are infectious diseases, there's a loss of biodiversity, flood, wildfire, and extreme heat. These are selected risk. And if you look at the potential downstream consequences, it could be increasing in terms of pesticides use, in terms of antimicrobial use. Then you have decline in ecosystem function, decline in the food production, increase in the pathogen spillover, and the change in the range of vector and the pathogens that we have. And the impact is on the mental health, the physical health, and also mortality part of it. So ultimately, the entire cascading of these effects is on the human, on the wild animals, domestic animals, and the plants. And that is something that is coming out very sharply. So what are the things that are needed? Definitely mitigation is important. Adaptation is there. Also increasing resilience of the people and the ecosystem, and climate change attribution studies need to be. We need to do much more studies on how this has been linked, because health and climate change are not directly linked. There has been major other drivers of health outcomes, and that is something that we need to do some more studies and some more research to be done to establish that. Then fourth insight is also very interesting, and I think West Bengal is one of the states which should take note of this, is about climate mobility. What we have found that the climate change has been increasing, the migration of people. So if there is a huge, if there's a landslide in the upper regions of Himalayas, people and they think that they are not able to stay there, people start to migrate, or there's a seasonal migration. There is a and migration is a multifaceted phenomenon. It's not only about climate change, but it's also about aspirations of people, also about coping with the floods that comes in yearly. And I've been working very extensively in the northern belt of India, especially UP and Bihar, which is fed by the rivers from Nepal. And we have seen that very extremely people have been migrating from those areas, and there has been a migration pattern from very, very long time because of staying in a very high risk environmental risk zones. So climate change is what we are predicting that will increasingly affect the mobility, and anticipatory action is needed to assist mobility and reduce displacement. That's something that we need to also work on as policies and people who are working in these areas. The fifth insight is about human security, that if we really want to work on human security, we must work on climate security. We have to strengthen climate security because human security is very intrinsically what we call linked with the climate change issues, and that's why the drivers of violent conflict and are intertwined in some areas. And this is a global insight. Some areas in Africa we have found that climate change leading to resource insecurity is also leading to what we call the violent conflict within communities, and that's something that we must take note of. The sixth insight is about the sustainable land use. I think this is one of the major things that we have not taken much note of. There was a report by IPCC on land. There was 3 special report before the final report came in. The first focused on the land, second is on the 1.5-degree warming, and third is on oceans and stratosphere, where I was coordinating lead author as well. What we found in the land report is that there's an urgent and radical shift in land use which is required to meet climate targets, including the what we call the halting expansions of the natural areas. And that is something that our land is under much stress. One is that there has been if you look at India's example, there has been much a number of people deriving their livelihood from piece of land is increasing because the density of population, West Bengal, the density of population is very, very high. And we have also transgressed into what we call non-sustainable land use practices because of agriculture and the introduction of inorganic agriculture in our lives, and that has also been leading to unsustainable outcomes for agriculture, and that is something that we must take note of. This is another global study, which was the point number 7, that we looked at what can be done, what has been the solutions, and then we've seen that the private sustainable finance practices are actually not it's not working well. So there has been crop insurance, there has been private insurance which has been given as part of solution, but world over, especially in the global south, it has not worked very well due to multiple reasons, but also because there has been not much of setting patterns in terms of how because when it comes to collecting premium, these companies will come up very forward, but when it comes to providing insurance amount when it's time the need of the people, that's where they fail largely, and that's one of the problems that we have been seeing. So sustainable finance practices in the private sectors are also failing to harness investment that meaningfully contributes to what we call meeting the climate change targets. This is, this report was prepared just before the COP, Sharm el-Sheikh COP, and in fact, loss and damage has been one of the things on the agenda by the climate activists and the researchers. The 8th point is about how we must need the loss and damage fund globally. I think that is the what we call the planetary imperative that we have. It's an urgent imperative for the countries to put it up, and that's something that has seen it. So that would have required a coordinated policy response, and thankfully in Sharm el-Sheikh on the last day and last moment this has been announced. So that's something which is I would say a great effort, but we'll see. The devil's lies in the detail. We'll see next COP what happens, what is this loss and damage fund when it comes in flesh. Then the 9th insight is about inclusive decision making. See, climate change is a very global phenomenon. That means what happens in America, what happens in Africa has an impact in Asia, for example, and vice versa. So it's a very global phenomenon, but it's the impact is very localized. What happens in Bardhaman will differ very much from what happens in Darjeeling district, for example, right? So within the districts also, within sub districts also, there has been variation, and that means if you really want to work on long-lasting, effective, adaptation, we must be more inclusive in our approach, and that means it has to be inbuilt within the panchayat systems. How do we look at climate resilient development? Every programs and most of the program which deals with the what I would say natural resource aspects of our lives must be linked, seen through climate lens, and that's why inclusive decision making is one of the major aspects of climate change, I would say, and that's something, one of the points that we have. And number 10, the last insight is about the structural barriers in unsystematic lock-ins. Altogether, if you see, there has been, the world over, there is still very resource-intensive economies are working, and that means, see, our carbon footprints, all said and done, India's carbon footprint, per capita carbon footprint, is one of the lowest in the world. That means we are still not a very resource-intensive society. But if you compare it with China, if you compare with Russia, you compare it with the US, they are many fold. US is about 15.5 tons, while VR is about 1.7 tons, India, per capita carbon emission. And that shows the kind of differences. And we must retain our, ways in which we have, but we also poised to be $5 trillion economy. And that means that when the more economy goes stronger, the carbon footprints are also stronger. And that means that we must devise what we call the green economy pathways. And that is something, the shift that must be taken place. And this is the last point on the insights. I'll go over quickly in terms of what has been the outcomes of the 3 reports. So as you know, IPCC has 3 working groups. The first working group is about the science of climate change. So that looks into what has been the science behind climate change and what has been the advancement. Second report is about adaptation. So how do we adapt to climate change? And third is about mitigation. How do we mitigate? All 3 reports have come out. The last one was early this year, and I'm trying to put this together. It's a voluminous report. I've been part of working group 2, which is focusing on adaptation, and thousands and thousands of papers have been read and consolidated, and assessment has been done. So it's very difficult for me to, and these are also global report. That means India is one of the data points, and West Bengal will not even appear there, right? So we'll take some of our examples, but most of the time it is actually about Asia, which is the closest lower denominators that we have. And that is, so here what I'm doing here is that I'm trying to decipher what is mean for India, and then I'll have 5 points which I want to put forward. So the first point is definitely about what we call the people who have been denying climate change. And this part, what we've seen, that the report has very unequivocally put forward that the science is telling us that the climate change is here and now, right? We already have success, and that's another problem, is that the Paris Agreement said that about 1.5 degree was the end of century target, but the recent climate change report, the 6-month report, is telling us that we will be reaching this target only by the middle of by 2050 itself, which was end of century target. And as one of the speakers, Brikesh, has already told us that we may cross 2 degree, which is now end of the century target. But why is this important? Why warming is important for us to know? And warming, each fraction of warming actually leads to catastrophic changes in the ecology and the environment. And that's why we must limit our warming. And that's something that is coming up very sharply. So number one message is that the climate change is here and now, and we must look into what can be done to adapt to this one and mitigate the problems of climate change, because it is impacting our lives in all fronts. The second part, which is coming very sharply, is about that the risk is going to magnify and adaptation is hitting its limits. What we say that we have the window of opportunity is only about 15 years to 20 years. That's the window of opportunity. Otherwise, we are actually breaching a lot of boundaries, climatic boundaries, and that means that the risk is magnifying. We are already hitting the limits of adaptation, and that means if the global warming is unchecked, climate hazard will actually increase manifold, and we are reaching the point of hard limit to adaptation. You've seen the graph I have already sent. So we are already going towards that side, and that's something which is very, very worrying for a lot of us. The third point is about cities. We have not looked into much in terms of the city's resilience to climate change, but this time in the adaptation report, we have a special chapter on the cities of the world, and we found that the cities are also, and then some cities, millions of people are living in the cities. More than 1 million people in low-lying settlements. They face hazards such as sea level rise, subsiding coast, and also the flooding at high tides. So about 350 million urban residents live with the threat of water scarcity. Climate change impacts such as extreme temperature also worsen the ongoing problems in the city. And our cities are also not planned to face the problems of climate change. Infrastructure has been very old, sometimes as old as the British years. We have not updated much of the infrastructure, or most of the infrastructure which has been done are knee-jerk solutions. Also, in the wake of urbanization, we have also been killing some of the say water bodies, and I've seen West Bengal from a close quarter. Most of the time the development happens at the cost of the ponds, which is there. The recent survey of ponds of the water bodies by Government of India shows that West Bengal is one of the richest in these things. And in fact, this is one of the resilient process through which, if you protect the lakes and ponds of West Bengal, that itself would have been one of the major ways in which you can combat climate change. Cities also, and I come from Hyderabad. I've seen how Hyderabad also was used to see Bangalore, Hyderabad. These are all city of lakes, but in the wake of urbanization, we have been killing these lakes and building, and that means when the water, one shower happens, to 100 or 50 millimeters of rainfall, or 100 millimeter rainfall, which happens, the water has nowhere to go. So water enters the urban high-rise apartments, and you may have seen last year all these BMWs were floating in the water. In fact, yesterday a girl drowned in Bangalore, and these are things that is unplanned cities that we have, and we are only doing what we call knee-jerk solution. There is no planning actually to cope with the climate change. So urban areas are also being very, very great at risk, because the concentration of population is very, very high. And also some of the regions in West Bengal, for example, will come to those issues as well. The fourth part is very important takeaway, is that the livelihood patterns are changing very, very fast. This is actually a picture from the North Bengal area itself, close to the border of Assam. This changing livelihoods in climate and environmentally stressed areas and the climate change hotspot regions have implications that are gendered. We have seen that the men are migrating and the women are actually doing triple shifts to cope with the situations, right? So I have personally been working on issues of gender. I've seen that women get up as early as 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning, and the day goes on till late in the evening because men have migrated. The burden of agriculture is on them. The burden of looking after elderly people is on them. The children are on them. So this is something that is they're not able to cope up with the changes which is happening. Not that the men who migrate are also gallivanting. They're also toiling in the urban areas as rickshaw pullers or as construction laborers, and also it is actually very disturbing to see that the large population, and this is about 300 million, if you look at Indian condition, is about 300 to 400 million who are on the bottom of the pyramid are directly impacted by this, but there hasn't been much policies to support these kind of things. There has been numerous other things, but looking at how we can also support this kind of population is important for us to know. The last point here is about, if you look at the geography of India, you'll find that we are actually greater risk from all sorts. So on the top, we have Himalayas, which is the glaciers are melting, the water, the risk is rising. You'll see what has, Uttarakhand, Himachal Pradesh, you look at the Western Himalayan region, Eastern Himalayan region, all over, catastrophic events are happening. Then on the bottom, we have coastline, 7,500 kilometers coastline. West Bengal is one of the states. Odisha is another state. Tamil Nadu, Andhra Pradesh, these are states are directly hit by the number of cyclones. The report that I was part of, the special report on oceans and grasphere, we found that the number of cyclones have actually increased in severity and in frequency over last 10 to 15 years. And the number of super cyclones which has been appearing sometimes not only once in a year, but twice in a year, in the same season, pre-monsoon, during the monsoon, post-monsoon. And this number is going to rise as we are warming, as we are increasing carbon dioxide concentration in the in our environment. This is going to go up, and that is something that is there. And then, as I said, we have the semi-arid regions, which is also hardest hit because of the thing. So we are not saved from any side, and that's something that we must really look into. So these are the major I'm trying to decipher the report for India. Let me just come a last point of my presentation, which is on the climate change issues in the West Bengal, state of West Bengal. I'll take only 10 minutes to give you 5 points and 5 solutions that I have been bringing in, and I'll close it. So first, this is no-brainer that the rising sea levels and the coastal erosion that we're seeing in West Bengal region, especially like Sundarlan, Bans and other vulnerable impacts of climate change. We also see the rising sea level leads to increased erosion. You have saline intrusion into freshwater bodies and also displacement of coastal communities. And this is something which is a striking feature, but what can be done about it? So I have about 3 points here. One is definitely to implement what we call the coastal protection measures, such as constructing seawalls, dikes, and embankment to mitigate the impact of rising sea level wherever possible. Yeah. Second is about promoting mangrove conservation. I think forests have been the first line of defense, but most of the areas what we see has mangrove forest protection program has been yielding much less result than it should have, and that's something that we must look into. They are natural buffers against coastal erosions and storm surges, and that means that wherever they exist, we must protect them and protect with the full heart there. Third is about developing sustainable land use planning process. I've talked about the land issues earlier that prohibit the construction of vulnerable coastal areas and promote the relocation of communities in the high-risk zone. That's something that we must look into it. When it comes to, for example, increase frequency of cyclones, you've seen that the West Bengal is prone to cyclones, then climate change is expected to amplify these extreme weather events, which is already happening. Cyclones, and last 3 years itself, you see the cyclone Amphan, then you have Takute and Yas, and then Sitrang and Mandos in 2022 that has caused significant damage, which I don't have to tell you, you guys already know about it. But what is there to be done? Now, one is to enhance the early warning systems and disaster preparedness. I think here Orissa has done much better in terms of saving its communities from the increased cyclones, and that is something that we must learn from, and minimizing the loss during the cyclones. Second is improvement of infrastructure resilience by constructing coastal resistant buildings and strengthening the existing structures. And third is to invest in climate-resilient agriculture practices, thus promoting crop diversification, introducing climate-resilient crop varieties, and reducing the impact of cyclones on agriculture productivity, because once the productivity declines, also it impacts the lives of people post-cyclones, and that's something that we must look into. Then we have this, what we call the water scarcity and the drought part of it. We have seen that the climate change has been disrupting the rainfall patterns. Increasingly, water scarcity and drought has been coming to as forefront, also severely affecting the agriculture, affecting West Bengal crop yields and food security, and putting the pressure on the water resources for domestic and industrial purpose. And what is to be done? And I have 3 solutions that I would like to put forward for this August audience. One is to implement water conservation and management practice. This is happening, but at a smaller scale, and something that we must look into how we can map it out for the entire region, not only 1 or 2 regions, and efficient agriculture techniques. Then second is to develop water storage infrastructure, such as reservoirs and water. These tanks and ponds must be protecting, and that's something that recent, as I said, the recent survey of water bodies has been brought in, and these for thousands of years these ponds and lakes have survived in West Bengal. I remember very interestingly, long back, I was doing field work in the southern West Bengal areas, and they had this Panchkuti system. The Panchkuti system, the fifth part of your land is actually dedicated for conserving water, ponds and all that, which is used for secondary, irrigation during the winter time. And these systems are slowly has been disappearing in the wake of more access to groundwater issues, and that's where things are becoming more worse for us. Third is to promote what we call water efficient practices in industries and encourage the use of recycling water for non-potable purpose. Then coming the heat waves, and you've seen how heat waves have also been striking in West Bengal. The rising temperature due to climate change is also a result of more frequent and intense heat waves. It can have detrimental effect on human health, especially for vulnerable populations, aging population, people who are more than 60 years old. They directly get impacted by the heat wave. Also, urban heat line effect, which is in the densely populated urban regions like Kolkata, that leads to discomfort and health risk, and something that is to be done. What are solutions here? One is definitely about the heat wave early warning systems and public health campaign to raise awareness about the heat related risk and promoting what we call the protective measures. Second is to enhance the urban planning by incorporating more green spaces, saving what we call blue and the green infrastructure within the cities also is important. Blue infrastructure is the water body, green infrastructure is the forest, and that's something that needs to be done at a much faster rate. Urban forest, also cool roofs for mitigating the urban heat island effects is important. Improving the access to cool shelters, especially in vulnerable population, ensuring the adequate provisions of drinking water during the heat wave events. This is something that we need to also see how it can be part of what we call heat adaptation plan for cities and villages. The other issues about agriculture productivity and food security, we have seen that how agricultural productivity is also going down. It's negatively affecting the agriculture growth. And what can be done about is to, there are a number of things, I'll not read them out, but trying to put forward in terms of what we can look into how we can promote sustainable agriculture practices, the organic agriculture, going back to those basics are very important. That's all from my side. Thank you so much for your attention, and I'm very happy to take up questions. Over to you, Rikesh.
Thank you, Dr. Anjal Prakash. And actually, I'd like to go. So the way we can structure questions is, Badri, I won't be able to see who's raising hand in the room. So we're going to prioritize questions from the room there in Kolkata first. And people who've joined online, I'll encourage you to just type your questions in the chat window. But Badri, over to you to facilitate any questions that may be there in the room. Badri, do we have any questions from there? Because we can't hear anything.
Can you hear me now?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
So, as per IPCC 6 report, there are many models that have been developed across the globe, like HAT-GM 3 or MIROC 6. Which is the best suitable model for West Bengal in your perspective?
Yeah, that's a difficult question because I don't work on the modeling part of it. So it's not very easy for me to handle it. But what I know from my colleagues and other people, I think one is that these models are global climate models. What we must do is to have a prediction which is not only state-specific predictions, the model giving us like a state-level data, but also going to district and sub-district level. I think the model advancement has happened. I have people in different in scientific institutions in India, which is telling us that we can produce 25 by 25 square kilometers modeling results in terms of what happens in the short, near term, and the long term future of the state, and that is something that we must access. At the moment, the state planning process doesn't include the predictions of climate change. So that's where I think your question is very important, that these models have been there, but we must also bring those models back to our policy and planning, which helps the people in coping and adapting to the climate change. That is what I would say, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Am I audible?
Yes.
Okay. So what we understand from your presentation is that even if we were to limit the temperature rise within 1.5 degrees centigrade, still we would, almost every nook and corner of our state would face the consequences. So we understand that a large section of the marginalized population is in Sundarbans. So what could be your, some maybe 5 to 10 quick interventions that could be taken up in areas as vulnerable as Sundarbans? I understand you've mentioned already about dikes and embankments and mangrove conservation. But particularly when you say the men migrate, and it's the women folk who shoulder the responsibility, and they are working three shifts, in a day. So what could be, in such a situation, what could be the best interventions that could be taken to sort out the situation in the present predicament that we are in?
Thank you, ma'am. It's a very good question that you asked, and also very intriguing in a sense that because it's not only about climate change, it's also about how the society is organized to protect its own vulnerable people. Coming to the Sundarban question first, I think there has been numerous studies which has happened in both the Indian and the Bangladeshi part of Sundarban. I have had experience to work in the Bangladesh part of Sundarban, and I have done some anthropological work in that area. One is that the Sundarban, both sides, the Indian and the Bangladeshi part, is one ecosystem. The division is actually very artificial, and that means that we must work together with the Bangladesh government to protect the Sundarban area. That is number one, and that would also include that we must understand what is the impact of, say, sea level rise on Sundarban. What happens when the ecosystems are on a brink, or there's a problems in the way in which management of water happens in those areas. That's number one. Second is definitely the mangrove forest all across things needs to be protected, not only protected but also enhanced, because these are the first line of defense for people against the cyclones. And Sundarban being been very exposed to the areas, especially for cyclones, during the cyclones and all that. These are the people, the fisher folk community, who directly depends on the fish production, gets affected very much. These people needs to be protected, and that's something that's an early warning system that is there. I think there we need to also understand how Orissa has done very well, and learn from Orissa of how it can be done. And Orissa is not Tamil Nadu, not Maharashtra. I mean, they're not the big states in terms of economy. They are also like us, West Bengal, in fact, the poorer in West Bengal in terms of its GDP outcome. So they have done it very well. So this is not about money. It's all about the willingness of the administration to help the people. That's the second point I would say. Looking at the other issues of gender, These are much larger questions. I think the entire Bangla, migration which happens from the eastern belt, and that includes West Bengal, Orissa, Bihar, Jharkhand, to the economies of South, for example. I see sitting in Hyderabad, I come across many people. The moment I see them, I understand that they are either Bengali, Oriya, or Bihar or Jharkhand people. And there are many laborers who migrate to these areas, and that shows that there has been some deep malaise in the way in which our economies have also functioned over the years. And Eastern India has definitely lagged behind in industrialization, in providing skills and jobs. So these are slightly more deeper questions, ma'am. And I think we must reflect on this one. But I think the immediate measure, I would say that social policies must work on ground. I think there's some of the advancement in terms of direct benefit transfer, in terms of giving very simple thing like a Vidhva pension, a very simple scheme like protecting people who have been old age pensions. These things must work, because these are something which is directly benefited by people, especially those who are most vulnerable and marginalized. So one is about building economic resilience for people by providing the state providing certain social policy benefits to these vulnerable populations. Second is also long-term skill building. I think one problem is also lack of industrialization, lack of jobs for women sitting in there. And I've worked also in Gujarat, and I've seen that how small-scale MSME sectors have also been bringing work to the women out there. So when women are sitting for 2 or 3 hours, they actually can earn 100, 200 rupees by being at home, because they also have to look after their. So there is strategic gender need. There is the gender needs which are fulfilled through bringing out certain services to them and getting them engaged in the large economy and the formal economy process. There are a number of things that one can discuss further, ma'am, but it's a very interesting question that you asked, and I really thank you for this question.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Yes, you have a question? Yeah, please carry on. I'll do it later, please.
Hello, sir. Hello, everybody. I had a question regarding the climate refugees becoming a reality in the state of West Bengal. And as Anjal sir, you mentioned that you have worked in the Bangladeshi side of Sundarban. I have read a little about how they have handled the climate refugee crisis, and would like to know your version of how has it helped, or what the successes and failures are of the Bangladeshi government handling the climate refugee crisis in Sundarban.
Yeah, no, Bangladesh also, thank you so much. This is again a very good question. See, Bangladesh has been coping with the climate change impact for a pretty long time. And there have been, the recent surge in the economic advancement in terms of the export-led economy that Bangladesh has done has bring in some money for them to think about this. Earlier, it was not there. So 10, 15 years before, if you would ask me, the same thing is not the same which today's Bangladesh has. That means they are much more stronger at GDP outcomes, and that means they have more money to support some population. But they have not been able to solve much of these issues of migration. See, in Dhaka, for example, or in other places, there has been this. I'll give you one example of this, what they call the rickshaw lords, right? So rickshaw lords are a concept where as a person sitting in any of the urban location, you have about 10 to 15 rickshaws, and these are cycle rickshaws. And then these people who migrate from the vulnerable areas, they're not there in the city for more than 6 to 7 months. They're there to earn money and then go back. And then they also to look into agriculture. So then rickshaw lords, what they do is that they rent this rickshaw back to this migrant population, and then they extract a lot of money. So if you earn 100 rupees, 50 rupees will go as a rent for the rickshaw, which is actually very disproportionate to the based on the kind of work that the work that goes behind pulling a rickshaw. So these are things which are structural problems, and Bangladesh has not been very I think they are still struggling to come out. So one couple of things that I've seen in Bangladesh is what they've done is that they've promoted shelters for the migrant populations, and some support has been there, but not much which is noteworthy for us to replicate. I think West Bengal is much better economy if I look at it that way, and we must devise our own ways. And most of the problems of West Bengal is also about long distance migration. So it's interstate migration which happens. What Jharkhand has done recently, they started the registration in Bangalore and Hyderabad. So any migrant worker who comes from Jharkhand will have to register in those states. And this is an interesting program which is supported by OMDR Trust, which helps them. So you when you register with your Aadhaar card or things and your mobile number, in time of need, these people are supported. So you already have, the state has the list of people who are from Jharkhand, and they are there in the time of stress and the need. They are supported. So first level is about in migration and out migration from a particular city and all that. There is a lot of work which is required in migration. It's a multifaceted phenomenon. Climate change is just one spoke in the larger wheel of migration issues. So I would end it at that. Thank you so much.
Anjal sir, there is a follow-up question again on migration. It's in the chat window, which is I'll read it out. It's in Hindi. कि सुंदरबन में कई द्वीप पानी में डूब चुके हैं और कईयों पर ये खतरा बढ़ रहा है. तो क्या बंगाल की सरकार को पर्यावरण की मार से पैदा होने वाले इन शरणार्थियों के लिए कोई ठोस नीति बनानी होगी फ्यूचर में?
तो इसमें मैं अगर हिंदी में रिप्लाई कर सकता हूं तो उनके लिए तो मैं ये तो बोलूंगा मुन्ना जी आपके लिए कि देखिए सुंदरबन में जो चौड़ लैंड्स हैं और नॉर्थ बंगाल में भी बहुत सारे चौड़ लैंड्स हैं ना, तो और ये बात आप सही है कि कई द्वीप जो है वो पानी में डूब गए हैं और सी लेवल राइज के कारण और कभी-कभी हाई टाइड्स के कारण भी होता है, उन पे बहुत ज्यादा खतरा उन पे मंडरा रहा है. तो और वहां से लोग बहुत माइग्रेट कर रहे हैं. जो पहला जो क्वेश्चन था मैडम का, उनका भी वो क्वेश्चन था कि सुंदरबन के जो माइग्रेशन वहां से हो रहा है, और ये माइग्रेशन हम देख रहे हैं कि ये सब जगह जो भी क्लाइमेट स्ट्रेस्ड एरियाज हैं वहां से माइग्रेशन हो रहा है. और ये माइग्रेशन हमारे इसका जो डेटा है वो बहुत मुश्किल है उसको कलेक्ट करना, क्योंकि लोग जो है इंडिपेंडेंटली माइग्रेट करते हैं, तो इसका इंफॉर्मेशन जो हमारे पास है वो बहुत कम आता है. कोई भी सरकार को ये डिफिकल्टी होगी कि किस तरह से, क्योंकि जनरली क्या होता है कि माइग्रेशन का डेटा हम सेंसस में निकालते हैं, तो वो 10 साल में, इस बार तो वो सेंसस भी नहीं आ रहा है, तो 10 साल 12 साल के बाद आपको पता चलता है कि क्या हो रहा है माइग्रेशन पैटर्न. बट यहाँ पे तो ये बहुत स्ट्रेस माइग्रेशन है, विच इज शॉर्ट टर्म माइग्रेशन, एंड इट्स वेरी डिफिकल्ट टू गेट दिस information at a state level. What one can do is that we need to have, one is that environmental protection program at the local level, right? So localizing climate action, local level mein how do we look at, and Sundarban is a very unique ecology. It has certain very strong functions to mitigate climate change. It is not only so people who are living there are also a part of it. So one solution I'll try to bring in, and also to the previous person who has asked this question, is about climate credits that we have been working on. So there's a new kind of a more information about how we can trade climate credits, and that means that someone who is a polluter and want to fix the pollutant, in a sense that they want to buy climate credit in Sundarban for areas which is actually fixing carbons. Can we have a trade kind of arrangement where these people can send money and buy certain carbon credits for them, and that is reflected in their balance sheet. And this has been happening because of the new ESG regulations. There are a lot of companies who are looking out for these kind of things, but we need to have the platform. One is at the national level. We don't have a policy at the national level. I've written an op-ed very recently about climate level credits. I think that is one. And then also looking at how they can work with the state government to bring out. That will be one solution through which we can bring in more investment, which will help not only the people, but also ecosystems, especially a fragile ecosystem like a Sundarban. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Anjal sir. I would now like to hand it over to Mr. Balamurugan, who's the CEO of Environment Department. So, sir, over to you to share some thoughts, questions, and even for closing remarks. Over to you, sir.
No, I think more questions will be there. Somebody online also, right?
Yeah, that was just asked.
Okay. First of all, I want to thank. Okay. I want to thank Mr. Anjal. It's very pleasing to listen from a leading author, like lead author of the IPCC. Hope I'm audible.
Yes, sir.
Oh, sorry.
You are.
It was pleasure listening to you. Thanks for your valuable time, Mr. Anjal. So I have a very basic kind of a blunt question. इसका बारे में बहुत सारा discussion हुआ है Mr. Bharti के साथ. Many of the solution what we speak about for climate change, to transform that into action, we need, political ecology support. We need the support of political leaders. We need the support of media. Now, is there any research going on to quantify, if there is a cyclone, for example, is there any research going on to quantify how much is the contribution by the climate change, how much it is natural? So unless we say this, every natural calamity, be it a cyclone or drought, they'll be taken care of because it has been happening for longer years, even before this climate change issues. So is there any research organization focusing on to find out this is the percentage of research due to climate change? For example, you told about Amphan. We don't know. In Navarna, people don't know it is due to climate change. It has been happening for long years. Maybe my question is very blunt. Is there any such research going on to quantify, to monetize climate change aspect of the causes?
Okay, yeah, that's a very good question, sir. And I must say that this has been a point of contention. In fact, this is the point on which the industrialized north are always telling us that will not give you loss and damage because we can't attribute these events to climate change. Can you attribute? Can you see what is the attribution to climate change? What has been the contribution to climate change on leading this impact? But the science has advanced so much, and there's been one study which was done by the Indian Institute of Tropical Meteorology in Pune, IIT, PM. This study actually, IITM, is a study which has shown that over the, and they have related the warming with the rise of the cyclones. And they have found that about 40% of the cyclonic events, and also the severity of cyclones has been increased over the last 15 years. And that is not only in the eastern, in the east coast, but also in the west coast, which has not been very prominent for what we call the for cyclones, and that the West Bengal, this side Bay of Bengal is much more prone to cyclone, but it's also spilled over to the western region, and that is one the study. So there has been study, but I understand your question, and I think there is much more studies which is needed to attribute these things. But one, from the IPCC report, one thing was very clear that these events have been on a rise, and there is no other explanation than the global warming, which has been attributed to these events which is happening. See, for example, and you will find, there's 250 millimeters of rainfall that has happened in just 48 hours in Himachal Pradesh last year. Incessant rain, which is unprecedented in the history of Himachal Pradesh. Similar events are happening in all across the thing in Bangladesh. Last year there has been rains in the northern area which has never seen such kind of things. So these are things which people are able to understand and relate to this climate change. But definitely I too get your point that we need to also see how do we attribute it. Many times it's also very easy for politicians to pass off these events as climate-led events, so that they can say that we don't have anything to do with it. It's just a global phenomena. We can't do much about it. And that's not true either. But because a lot of time it is a very strong, what we call it, the society is strong, the social fabric is strong, the social policies are strong. The impact of these these events will be much lesser. For example, if there's a huge rain in Bombay, for example, right? So and you will see every year now there is, and then now earlier it used to come every once in 2 years. Now you'll find in one season there'll be 3 or 4 events, like Mumbai getting standstill. So there'll be water all over Mumbai. 5 days Mumbai is just going to go berserk. This has been and Mumbai is one of of the largest, one of the most, what I would say, economically advanced municipalities of Asia. They're more wealthier they're very, very wealthy municipality, but they have not been able to devise ways in which we can actually build climate resilient infrastructure. And every year people face a problem. So these are things that is a much larger question. But at the end, I would say that the politics of the day is where the answer lies. The buck stops there. I think, and I have now been more wiser over the years that without working with the politicians, you can't get this change done. So, and that means at the top level of politics is where you have to engage with. Politicians are also very receptive to these. My also perception of them has changed over the years. I think they are pretty receptive, and if you show them that how it is going to affect their constituency, they'll be very happy to work with you. So scientists must engage more with politicians. Bureaucrats like you should, you're already working very closely with them, but I think scientists also have been keeping a distance with them, which should not be the case. I think they should also work very closely with them. Journalists are already there, but I think that's more and more in the media here. Over to you, sir. Thank you.
Anyone else? Want to thank.
Is there any time to take one more question? Or
Yeah, please. No, carry on. Please.
Should we?
Yeah.
I just wanted your thoughts on something new that I've maybe it's been in place for a long time, but I just came to know of this recently, that as per the UNDP modules, there's something like climate insurance, and that comes for cities. It comes for for maybe blocks or maybe vulnerable areas. So any thoughts on that? I mean, when disaster strikes and when there is a very emergent need of supplies. I mean, when a place is already under kind of attack, climate attack. So how does your thoughts on how does climate insurance help, which is again from a different source, from a different place altogether? I couldn't really correlate on this. So just your thoughts on this. So it's not really part of this.
No, it's a very good question. I think I've covered in one of the 10 advancements, the 10 points that I've said, I've covered this as well, but I think I'll elaborate further for you. Climate finance, especially the insurance part, has not been very promising. What we have seen that, and there's been a couple of studies which is done which shows that the amount of money which the agencies, and I will not name the agency here, this is a recorded public event, but there has been some agencies who are very, very prominent, some of the banks who are very prominent. The amount of money that they collect as premium and versus the amount of money that they decipher when the climate catastrophe strikes are very, very, there's a huge gap in it, right? And that is where we need to. Yeah. So, and this has been, earlier times it has been also put it as a panacea for climate finance, has been something that is the private sector must come in and all that, but these private sector people must also be regulated. I think the state has a strong role in regulation of these people, because they will, I have seen personally that in the Marathwada drought, and then they'll bring in some clause or others to show that the drought is not attributed to climate change or otherwise. So there has been there's some gray areas definitely which is there, but we also need to have certain policy which are strong enough for us to serve the needs of the people, especially the poor and the marginalized, during the time that they need it. And that's never happened so far. And that's why globally, and it's not only about India, globally, this report has told us that the climate finance, the model of insurance has not worked. It has actually failed. And that means we must look into much stronger state policies, and portion of it could be privatized, but I think state has much more responsibility. They can't shed away the responsibility and leave it on the private owners, private parties to deal with the climate change. That is what I would say. And a lot more, and I would tell you my experience in person. I can't speak in a public forum on this.
Rashri?
Yeah, please. One more question.
Yeah. Good afternoon, sir. Sir, since you have gone through many countries' case studies, so I wanted to ask that you are talking about making policies. So what sort of policies these should be? Like, we know that we have a very short time span for fulfilling our targets, like the 2030 agenda. So what are the, what sort of policies, should they be mandatory, through incentivization? We know that very people are ready to accept incentivization also if the options are there. So how should they be, how can they implement it, and how can they act fast on field? If we are talking in respect to the time frame.
Yeah, so I mean, definitely one is that there's an urgency for us to act because the time is very short and the window of opportunity is also very short. And people at the local level needs a lot of support. So I would say that the policies, we have one of the best policies. If you look at to a website called climatetrackers.com, they track all the world, all the countries' policies. We have tick all the boxes there. So we are actually very good in terms of in showing that what policies. But the problem is that policies doesn't get translated into programs and actions. And that's where the connectivity, what we call the last mile connectivity of the policies leading to programs, leading to good climate action at the local level. That's where I think we need to put much more strength. On one or 2 points which can bring in more resources, as I said, the carbon credit part, where one can trade climate carbon credit across the regions and across the world, so that we can bring in more and more resources for these people and also pass it on to them directly. The primary people who are protecting the environment don't get benefited by it. You look at the forest dwellers, you look at the people in the Sundarban, they are never benefited by any changes. So if the big project comes in, it is siphoned off by all the people in the middle. So the money, small money, one not even 10% of the money actually reaches on the ground. Everywhere, everyone is there having the money for their own personal sake. And that's where the whole part works. And this is a structural problem. We must work something towards that. So I would say this much only now at this moment. Thank you.
Say thanks, and now you can give a formal thanks, right?
Anjal sir, I think with your discussions as we were going through, the climate in Kolkata has also changed. It's moved from hot to suddenly the rains are here now.
Yeah.
Balamurgan sir, would you like to share the vote of thanks?
Fine, I can say. I really want to thank Badri, but for you this would have not happened because you have been pursuant and you have been keeping in touch. We want to do something like climate mission in Tamil Nadu. जैसे हुआ है. Hope you will help. Catching the attention of, at the level of chief minister, somebody could have this climate mission is wonderful. We are trying in West Bengal. I really want to thank Mr. Anjal. I've come to ISB. I know how busy your schedule would be there. Thank you so much for giving a valuable time and, sharing your insights in climate change and telling us about the seriousness. And thanks for Mr. Prakash, who is also here from Asar. Thanks everyone here from our own department, from Biodiversity Board, everyone for making this occasion. This is the initiation we have taken. Thanks to Barna. I told about Badri. Barna is a key person. She has done so much for this. Thanks to everyone. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Let me just also, I'm at this moment, I'm actually working and training the MLAs from Meghalaya. There are 30 MLAs who have come, the MLAs who have just won, and they are here for a leadership training, and I'm giving them a climate change session tomorrow and working with them. So as you said, the engagement with the political body is very important. And I think that's one takeaway from this session for me, from your question that you all have asked. Thank you so much for having me. And I look forward to working with all of you in any capacity possible. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Anjal sir. Thank you, Balamurgan sir, and everyone in Kolkata. Hope you enjoyed the rains.